Hello, I'm Mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15. You might have heard of it, Alan. And all of the annuals, which I say do not count.
And I'm the available Alan Scherstl, and I've read every issue, including Amazing Fantasy 15, which they've reprinted a couple times in the actual Amazing Spider-Man run. But I've not read every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. I'm lying. I skipped some bad ones in the 90s Clone Saga, and I never finished Maximum Carnage. And I gotta say, honestly, Mark, if the book doesn't get more consistently pleasurable for me, issue 1000 might be my jumping off point.
Well, you heard it here, folks. The fill-in. Alan, you're back. You're back, and you're already swearing off the book. You'll fit right into our community.
Prove me wrong, Spider Office. Show me that you can put together a strong, coherent, exciting run, Spider Office. That's all I want. That's all I want. And Mark, you guys are always going on about how the annuals do count or they don't count. I'm curious. As a collector, did you buy the recent Amazing Spider-Man annual from this year?
I did buy the annual, and part of that was it wasn't. I shouldn't say it's not a choice. It's always a choice. But the person who runs my my subscription box at my local comic book shop, the person became, it was someone new, took over about a year ago, and I one time emailed him during the week to say, I forget which series it was, but they had an annual issue, and I said, oh, as a subscriber, are you going to put the annual in my box? And he said, yes, I think the annuals need to be counted as part of the subscription. However, he also said, I know many people think differently. So he put the annual in my box, and I purchased it. But I mean, he also explained to me what I have been saying on this podcast for more than 11 years now, which is that many other people just look at the annuals and say, this other series, unless you explicitly ask for it, you are not subscribing to it. So there you go. I mean, but I did get the new annual, and I thought it was fine as an inventory story. It was just fine.
I'll read it on Unlimited, but the thing I take away from that story is, man, your comic shop guy doesn't listen to this show.
I know. And he knows I have it. But I don't think the fact that one of his regulars is a podcaster does anything for him. I think he's just kind of like, whatever, man, just don't hassle me. I'm putting it in your box. If you don't want it, tell the cashier to leave it behind the counter. I'm like, sounds great, man. Viva la Forbidden Planet, New York. All right. Anyway, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors and Alan uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. And thank you for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
If you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, although who knows if I'll be there after 1000, subscribe to the Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review to help spread the word about our show. And let me note that when you leave a review, I'm usually not here. Usually you get Dapper Dan Gavosdin, who is much more on top of this stuff than I am.
I think Dan, like a little toaster buzzer goes off when he gets a review, and he shoots up out of bed and he's like, what did we get? Aw, nuts. Nuts, another 3 stars. Anyway, the podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members who would never give us 3 stars unless you got mad at us, I guess. If you want to receive early episodes, exclusive artwork, and keep this podcast going, even beyond issue 1000, go to AmazingSpiderTalk.com and consider joining our Patreon.
Today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 53. This issue was written by Zeb Wells. The cover features artwork by Ed McGuinness and Marcio Menyz. The interior pages feature pencils by Ed McGuinness and Todd Nauck. inks by Todd Nauck and Wade von Grawbadger, and colors by Marcio Menyz, and of course letters by VC's Joe Caramanga. This issue was first released on July 10th, 2024. You know, Mark, if we had episode titles on this show, this episode should be titled Off He Goes to Do Something. That
Yes.
is what happens at the bottom of every page of this issue. It seems like somebody goes off to do something that is very important, and we're not told what it is that they're trying to do. We are left to figure it out. Last time I was on this show, I praised you and Dan for like actually putting in the work to really look deeply at these stories and make sure that they make sense, make sure that they mean something, make sure that they're saying something, make sure that they're living up to like whatever promise and excitement we all felt the first time we read an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And I admire that because I can't always work up the capacity within myself to do that when I read one of these comics that takes 8 minutes to read. And, you know, I love that. Here I am, 2 issues in a row. I felt like I could do that with the first issue. I felt like with the first issue I did with you guys, number 52, that I had lots to say. This time, how do you guys do it each week? Week in, week out, issue after issue. There's nothing here to talk about. This is like just... It's like we're reviewing a volleyball rotation. This was just moving people around, you know, on a basketball court. Like nothing happens. I have accepted that comics sometimes take 8 minutes to read these days. And that didn't always used to be the case. In fact, when this show started back in the Brand New Day era, if you pick up an issue of Amazing Spider-Man, you've got 15 to 20 minutes of reading ahead of you. I know that because I reread a bunch of Joe Kelly issues this week for what we'll talk about later. And those issues have some content in them. This is just 8 minutes of story that seems to cover 8 minutes of time. It's not just that I read it quickly. It's just that it just feels like 8 minutes passed in this. It's like, you know, if you ever like play like Dungeons and Dragons or a game like that, or you watch people play Dungeons and Dragons, or you listen to people play Dungeons and Dragons, you know how like each turn of that game takes like 20 minutes and only 6 seconds in life pass? This is like one turn in Dungeons and Dragons. Each character does one thing and then we're on to the next issue. Nothing really has an impact. Nothing feels important. What should be big moments just don't land or seem to matter. Kamala and the Dr. Octopus arms should be like this awesome moment, and there is a little spirit and excitement, at least in the panel or two where she's wearing them. The temporary death of Wreck Rap. I'm sorry, spoiler. I expect Wreck Rap will be back. The death of Wreck Rap has almost no impact at all. I mean, he says cool when he dies. Like that might be a witty undercutting of the gravity of the moment, but the moment has no gravity to undercut, Mark.
No. Well, first off, Alan, let me say, you know, thank you as always for the compliments. I mean, you know, I don't want to say to anyone's credit or in anyone's defense, but the fact of the matter is, like, I think we just had more period to talk about last issue. This issue truly feels like the quintessential throwaway issue. It is we got a stack. We need 6 issues to fill a trade paperback, or whatever reason. You know, they solicit this thing as 6 parts. This was the wasted part, in my opinion, and you know, and wasted in that, yeah, there were things happening like the Wreck Rap, like Kamala Khan getting the arms, you know, Peter and Norman getting locked into the basement or whatever it is together. But at the end of the day, like in terms of actual consequences and progress in the story, there wasn't anything. Nothing moved forward. There were no pieces moved forward on the board. Everything kind of just moved laterally or was basically just rearranged on the board for the most part. You know, like nothing really had a build to it. You know, Wreck Rap especially. I mean, like, you know, like at the very least, if you're gonna kill him or feign killing him, you can give him the Kamala Khan treatment from issue 26 and have everyone holding Wreck Rap's dear corpse on the floor and really sell it, but we didn't even get that because, like you said, probably they're not killing him, because why would they kill Wreck Rap here in a throwaway book? Although they did do that with Boomerang at the end of the Nick Spencer run, so what do I know? But there's just no build, and at the same time, I also feel like we're just repeating a lot of the same beats. Craven's coming out and doing Craven stuff and orating and talking about, the spider and the goblin. And I mean, we literally end with Peter getting injected with the sins again. I mean, we're back to the beginning of the storyline with him and Norman. So I hate to be so cynical about this because, I in being introspective about, how we were reviewing things when you came on this show last time. I mean, you got me thinking, Alan, because, like good critics do, about how to be, good faith in our criticism here and maybe not to get so lost in the weeds about certain things and being a little more fair-minded about the book. And I felt like I was last time out, with all due respect. And then this time out, I'm just reading this thing and then I reread it again this morning in preparation for the show, and I'm like, yeah, nothing happens. It's just a lot of stuff. It's stuff, stuff happened, but nothing happened. I don't know. Do you see any kind of silver lining here in terms of how this was all set up and framed?
I felt like with issue 52, we had a lot of surprise in that issue because it was a team coming together and a very unexpected team. And it also had a little bit of that, we're nearing the end, let's revisit everybody who came up during this run, who you don't expect to see here. I certainly did not expect the Ock arms to be a major factor. I didn't expect Wreck Rap to be a major factor in this arc. And it got me kind of hyped about where this was all going. This issue, we see, it's not really going anywhere. Everybody's going to get to do one thing, sometimes kind of random. Like, why is Kurt Connors in the Dr. Octopus arms? Why would Kamala Khan, who is a professional superhero who takes the lives of civilians very seriously, why would she agree to this? Why does Kamala Khan need octopus arms to be able to stretch punch the Green Goblin? When she can stretch punch him anyway. That's kind of her whole thing. Why is any of this happening? I don't know, but you know what happens a lot in this issue? Off he goes to do something. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta say, I'm complaining a lot more this time. As I mentioned last time, I am generally a little more upbeat about the Zeb Wells run than a lot of the internet is. Even though I also feel like, well, if this is the best the Spider Office can do, I might be checking out soon because it's just, I don't know that it's really worth my time anymore. If a writer as talented as Zeb Wells, if this is the best that he can offer working within the conditions that Marvel and the Spider Office create for writers. But all that said, I am still, just like I was last time, I am still impressed that the book has settled into this relatively coherent moving of pieces around the board and setting up a climax rather than going off the rails entirely. I really was worried this book was going to go off the rails. And Wells is, at least, I can give him this, he's managing to incorporate all of these too many elements, the arms, Kamala, the Beyond Guy, the Living Braid, Jonah, Craven, into this finale, even if, these parts don't really mesh together. And at least everybody has something to do. Isn't Craven's whole thing like the spider versus the lion or whatever Craven thinks he is, the spider versus the tiger? Why is he acting like a goblin is like a force of nature that the spider needs to confront in a basement? None of that resonates, makes much sense. But I do admire that the book does have a sense of conviction about it, that it is trying to sell us all these, that Wells, Lowe, everybody involved is at least trying to make it make some sense and give everybody something to do. The book hasn't always done that, so I can give it that faint praise.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there is nothing in here that is legitimately head scratching from like a sheer comprehension and consumption of the media kind of standpoint, which is not what we could always say is the case in past runs at this stage of the end game, if you will. With that said, the one of the phrases you used, or one of the terms that you used to kind of describe what we were doing is, we're moving the pieces around the board for a climax. And yes, per the definition of the word, I mean, we're approaching a climax here, but is it climatic? I would argue that it's not. I mean, it is a climax because we know we are entering the last chapter of this. I believe this is the last chapter of our story. I could be wrong, and we're getting another. I don't have my solicit sheet here, but I think this is part 6, part 5, and next is the last one. But this is also kind of, that's a telling statement here itself, Alan. It's I think we're getting to the end of this arc here, but because there are elements that indicate this is the end. I mean, Peter and Norman are locked in a basement right now, and only one will emerge. So are we going to do 2 more chapters after this? It doesn't feel like we will. But is it actually climatic? I would argue that it's not. And part of that, frankly, I think is the idea of stakes. For the most part, this is after the initial, goblin conversion of Peter, which is, in and of itself, repeated beat from the Gleason storyline with Craven and Spider-Man's last hunt or first hunt or whatever you want to call it. We really haven't had the stakes explained to us here. What is at stake here? I mean, Norman's got this master plan. We really don't know what the master plan is beyond, he's going to give control of his empire to Peter, and everyone just seems really confused by it. And at the same time, he's trying to get Peter to destroy the spear or bring the spear back to him. Just changes based on the moment in the comic, it feels like. But other than that, it's not New York is not in jeopardy. I don't even know if Peter's in jeopardy. It just seems like, Norman wants Peter under his thumb, clearly, either in control of him through his sins or whatever. But it's not it's if you don't do this, you will die. It's just very kind of like you said, things are happening, but I don't know what's at stake here. I mean, are you getting a sense of stakes with this story at all?
Oh, absolutely not. Usually in a Norman Osborn story, there's the Osborn family to worry about. There's a lot of personal, baggage, a lot of personal connection with him and Peter's supporting cast to worry about. Usually somebody Peter loves might be in danger in some way. Usually it all just seems to matter more than beyond the two of them. And granted, we don't know what Norman's major plan is going to be here yet, because everybody else, lots of people do, but we don't. Mark, the rule of threes tells us that the third time Peter is injected with the goblin sins, that's going to be the funny one. So I don't know, maybe that's what's ahead of us. Maybe we've got a punchline. I don't know how to read the last page. I don't know how to read the last 2 pages, really, with the relationship between Norman and Peter right here, and who is prevailing and whose plan is, who is outsmarting the other, who is outfoxing the other. It's all pretty muddled to me. Norman seems to think that he has gotten the best of Peter here, and I have no idea how to evaluate the stakes of that, whether to feel worried about Peter here, whether to feel like this is a crisis or a low point that Peter needs to battle back from, because we have no idea what anyone's plan is. We could guess what Norman's plan is based on a lot of the hints that have been dropped here, but as you say, what we see of it seems pretty inconsistent from moment to moment and scene to scene. So I don't know. Has Norman, in the last page and a half of this comic, managed to upset Peter's plan? Or is he doing exactly what Spider-Man and Miss Marvel anticipated that he would back when they planned whatever it is that they planned? Last time on this podcast, I kind of joked that I don't really need a flashback scene of Kamala and Peter planning their Norman contingency. But now, honestly, reading this issue, seeing them strategize and think things through would be much more interesting than what we actually get on the page in this issue. Here we get this haphazard, random team up of characters who have appeared in this run, taking one attack at a time against Norman Osborn in a laboratory that looks like a random generic warehouse. Like, it's just not exciting. Why are they attacking him one at a time? Why are they not working together in any way? It all points to just how muddled this is. Only Kraven and the Living Brain seem to know what's going on. And the reveal again. And Doug, yes. Oh, I forgot about Doug. I'm kind of glad to see Doug back, by the way. That there are signs all over this book that this book is being created by people who actually do care. Mm-hmm. And I think the circumstances in which this book is created, though, make it very hard, even for people who care and have talent, to tell a story that really, really grabs readers.
Yeah, I mean, no argument from me on any of that. And, it's funny, like, going back a few issues, this was before your guest stint with us, Alan, but Dan and I were discussing, it was the issue where, I think where Norman first starts reverting back to the Goblin and attacks Peter, and Peter is like, he tricks him into bringing him back to the lab where he kind of pulls out his first Norman contingency. And like, there was a cleverness to that beat at the time there where I was like, okay, like that was a fun little, like, because I always love it when Peter is thinking a few moves ahead, like that's my favorite kind of Peter, like Peter who knows in general terms he's overmatched and undermanned and needs to, either bring the rubber gloves to face Electro or use a vacuum cleaner against Sandman or whatever it needs to be to kind of get one up on his opponent. I like that Peter. But like, I feel like by this issue, we kind of settle into that trope becoming too cute, because it's like, oh, well, I thought ahead and did this. And then Norman's like, well, you idiot, that's what I expected you to do. And he's like, well, you expected me to do that, so I did this too. And then it's like, but I expected, and it's not, it's just a game of one-upsmanship without it actually making any real sense. I don't want to say sense, but it goes back to the stakes. It's not making any, it's not bringing any stakes to the game. And frankly, the other reason why we're not getting any stakes to the game is because so much of the narrative here is being driven by secrets and subterfuge and, riddles and whatnot, whether it, and I'm not just talking about how Kreiju is speaking. Everybody's got a secret. And this was one of my big problems a lot going back during the Dead Languages arc that we talked extensively about. But it's like, if you're going to wrap so much of the storyline into a secret, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're not, yes, like, mysteries have their place in Spider-Man. I wrote this joke here in the notes. I'm just going to do it because why not? But, like everyone always talks about with time travel that, the move is to go back and kill baby Hitler. And I understand that. But if I could time travel, Alan, you know what I would do? I would go back to 1964 when Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were introducing the Green Goblin for the first time, Amazing Spider-Man number 14. And I would be like, hey, guys, I love what you did with the Goblin here. Spider-Man doing the movie with the Hulk and the Enforcers, really, great stuff. What if we just didn't do a mystery angle? What if we just, like, unmasked him at the end of the issue, and then, like, you could still find out Peter's identity, you could have him kill Gwen, I mean, like, you could do everything else the same, but just don't have the mystery angle. because then we wouldn't be tortured for the next 60 years with all of these mismanaged, mishandled mystery stories where every creator has to put his stamp on Spider-Man by coming up with a mystery. And that's what we're at right now. We saw it with Dead Languages, and now Zeb is going back to the well this time by like, I'm creating this like master plan, and nobody really knows what's happening except, but I know, but I can't actually tell the story in a way where you might figure it out. Because if I tell you something and figure it out, the mystery is dead, and that whole device is ruined. And I'm just like, ruin the device, man. Just tell a good story. What does Norman want to do? Why is withholding that hurting the story? It's not. I mean, withholding that information is not making this story more attractive to me. Just lay it out there. I'm going to do this because when I do this, I'm gonna become rich and powerful. I'm gonna kill someone you love. I'm gonna, make you be a person that you don't want to be anymore for the rest of your life. You're gonna be my slave. Whatever it is, just get it out there. And that is really where this storyline is getting tripped up right now.
Oh, preach on, Janakio. Everything you just said is these are the real problems with the book for me. Not that Peter's not married. I don't care. It's that. That kind of storytelling. It's just not working. I do want to point out, though, that I did hear that episode that you're talking about, quite unlike the staff at Forbidden Planet, which is a great story. One problem here is that it's not just a mystery box about what Norman is up to. The mystery is, what is Peter up to? What is Peter and Kamala up to? Is what Peter's doing with the Winkler device and the spear something that he and Kamala planned together? Why is the hero's plan secret and maybe a secret plan inside another secret plan at the same time when the villain's plan is secret? It's all just, as you said, Mark, off he goes to do something, and we're left to just kind of wonder what it might be. I know that suspenseful storytelling demands some withholding, some teasing of mysteries, and it can be done really well, and it's done great in loads of comics, and it's worked in Spider-Man before. But there's nothing but withholding information here in the interest of like maybe ginning up some kind of suspense. And instead of like anticipating what's coming next, I'm busy trying to remember like all the clues we've gotten. Like, wait, what does this person think is happening and what are they trying to do right now? Rather than what are they trying to stop and what steps are they taking? So I didn't go, oh, I wonder what's going to happen with the living brains, Gem and head bouncing down into the hole into the basement. That's what I was supposed to say. I didn't say that. Instead, I said, oh, that's another shoe that's going to drop later that I have to remember.
Right. For sure. And I was going to say that head blowing off, like, yes, you're right. It is setting something up, but that was like, I legitimately groaned at that moment because I'm just like, ugh, like here, even if it has a purpose, I just groaned at it. I don't know. Am I being a spoil sport here?
No, you're not, Mark. I did think you were being a little hard on the last issue sometimes, but this issue has at least two moments. I'm trying to remember if there was a third. At least two moments where somebody figures out what's going on, and then for some reason they can't actually tell us. You nailed it in your recap.
Well, that's fun. Let's talk about another kind of what I would refer to as like a recurring when we have an episode like this, folks, a recurring, I don't want to call it complaint, criticism. That's right. We're critics. We're criticizing. We're not complaining, Alan. We're more sophisticated than that. But this goes back to where's Peter? Although, to quote the great Dapper Dan, we got a text from him the other day where he said, "Where's Chasm?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dan, where's Chasm?" When Chasm's not on the page, all the other characters should be asking, "Where's Chasm? What's Chasm doing? What does Chasm think of this?" Well, where is Chasm, Alan? Oh, hold on. It says note.
Yeah.
Chasm died on the way back to his home planet. Okay, well,
we did not rehearse this, people. We did not rehearse this. A magic marker, a piece of cardboard, and 10 seconds of thought.
There you go. With that said, where's Peter Parker? And by that I mean, yes, we saw physically where he is in this issue, but man, oh man, and this happens a lot with I can't just make this a Zeb Wells problem. This has been a Nick Spencer problem. This has been a Beyond problem. This has been a Dan Slott problem. This happens a lot in this book over the last decade or so, I would say, which is Peter, meaning the narration inside his head, which has long been one of the driving narrative forces of Amazing Spider-Man. We'll go huge swaths of story without hearing from it. And this comic especially, we had like one little scene where he's struggling to put together his super spear MacGuffin, and he's like, I must fight the sounds in my head. And like, I admit, like, I was like, all right, that's kind of cool, but like, it felt like lip service because we really didn't get much further than that. It was kind of superficial, and then we kind of moved on and bopped around, and then he showed up and was there to save the day. But like, we're really not in Peter's head. We're really not getting, like, from his side what he's trying to do. Again, the stakes. Like, you know, he wants to stop Norman, but like, what's actually at stake for Peter here? I want more Peter. I want more, monologuing. I want more, kind of eccentricity from Peter and fighting off the spider demons or the goblin demons or whatever you want to call them. There was just not enough of it here. Do you have any thoughts on that?
When I swing around Manhattan, the thought balloons that bubble up above my head are, I wonder what Peter's thinking about this day. Next panel. You just don't hear Peter thinking much anymore. And then I'm like, going past the United Nations. Next panel. Boy, Peter hasn't had very many thoughts in, 100, 200 issues now? I wonder what that's about. It just keeps happening. Maybe I think, next panel, I'm swinging past the Marvel offices. Maybe this is not the fault of individual writers assigned to this book, and maybe it is the fault of this corporation, Marvel Comics, currently a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, preferring it that way. When writer after writer fails to do a basic thing that was for, I don't know what, the first 700 issues, like a key component of the book, I don't think you can blame the writers. I think this is the way Marvel wants it. They don't know what to do with Peter Parker. I think we need to accept, and this is part of why I'm saying things to myself like, maybe I'm done with issue 1000. Not just because it's a nice round number, not just because I'm an adult now, but Amazing Spider-Man no longer drives the Spider-Man narrative. It is no longer the place that people look to see who is the real Spider-Man, the official Spider-Man, whatever you think about it. It is just a pocket universe, the Marvel Universe Spider-Man, the 616 Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it. But it's not where the world knows Spider-Man. It's not where the world's conception of Spider-Man comes from any longer. And that, of course, is all the ancillary MCU Spider-Mans, the cartoon series Spider-Mans, all of those others. And that's fine. I'm at peace with that. What I don't understand is why Marvel is so timid about the character in Amazing Spider-Man when nobody except, 200,000 people, care? Like the readership is so small, they can still get everything that they need from an IP development perspective out of this series. They can get a Rec Rap, they can get a Spider Boy, they can get a Jackpot, they can get all of that stuff that they're clearly wanting these writers to generate, while still making Peter Parker a human being with agency, ideas, goals, and who makes decisions in his life that have some impact on the next couple years of his life and might matter to us or move us as readers. But no, they just seem terrified of him. And Mark, I have to say, I always say this every time I come on this show. part of what I like about this podcast, part of why I first got in touch with you and Dan, is that you guys approach these comics with an open-hearted spirit. You guys are never like inveighing moral opprobrium upon Marvel for not doing what you want, for not doing it the way you think. You guys are not sending death threats to Dan Slott or to Zeb Wells. I love that spirit. But I gotta say, when Marvel has when it's been this bad for this long, when this central element has been gone for so long, when the book has been this timid for this long, you gotta blame somebody.
Yeah.
My guess is it goes above Nick Lowe, but that's me.
I don't disagree with that, but that is a rabbit hole. Hey, I mean, maybe it's a rabbit hole we'll talk about in our last segment of the show, Alan. But hold that thought, or hold my beer. Was there anything else about Peter or lack thereof that you wanted to address before we talk about the art?
I miss that guy. I read a couple Joe Kelly Brand New Day issues, like I said earlier, recently, and that guy's pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Pete's a good guy, as his friends would call him. Including the creators who like to talk about Pete.
And can I add one thing, which is the first time in this run that we got a dark version of Peter. He was driven by the things that this current Peter Parker is worrying about. He went and he almost beat up Paul. That was pretty cool. That was a good issue.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I before we get to our grades here, I did want to touch on the art here. We've been doing these joint issues between Todd Nauck and Ed McGuinness. Todd Nauck famously is Dan Gavassin's favorite artist of all time. I'm kidding. Dan has always kind of had an issue with him, but Dan was like, "Oh, I liked what Todd's doing in these stories," and I have for the most part too. But I have to say, this was the first comic where we opened with a lot of the Nauck pages, and I was just kind of like, why is this guy here? Because once the story starts to pick up and we're in the lair with Osborn and its rec rap and the octopus arms and all that, we're in full steam Ed McGuinness here. And look, Ed McGuinness has his flaws. I mean, I'm not going to make it sound like, this is that he is the artist of our generation here. I'm not going that far, but I have legitimately enjoyed McGuinness's art over the last few arcs where he has shown up here, especially as kind of a contrast to John Romita Jr. And the overly cartoony style I think really works for Green Goblin. So I'm this and I don't expect anything to change in the last issue here. I don't have my little solicit calendar on me, but I have to assume once again it's going to be Nauck and McGuinness. But I feel like this is an experiment, going forward, Marvel should avoid. I don't know if this is due to deadlines or just because they were like, oh, well, this is what we did, so let's keep doing it. If one guy can do it, just let them do it. Because especially if it's McGuinness and it's a story like this, because I think his art works the best here. So that's my art commentary. Anything to add to that, Alan?
Just a little bit. As I talked about last time, when I read Amazing Spider-Man, I am very conscious of the fact that this is a book put together by a creative team, put together by this corporation, and their job is to get the book out, not to get the book right. And this is a case of that. They got the book out. Congratulations, guys, you did it. Some pages look like a rushed and overstuffed Mark Bagley issue. I thought the Nauck pages look like that. Some pages look like a fun but dumb Ed McGuinness comic. And some look like a cracked or Mad Magazine parody of an Ed McGuinness comic. That rec rap page. But to me, the real disappointment in the art here is not that it's inconsistent or that some of it's muddy. It's that a big Green Goblin fight involves a lot of people standing around in a nondescript warehouse-looking lab, and they take him on one by one while he uses his glider at ground level like a Back to the Future hoverboard. There are a couple things I liked here. Like, I liked Peter fighting with his brain while hot wiring the Winkler device to the Sin Spear. That looked like a McGuinness page to me. And, the poses, the acting, they were very strong. Like, that sold it. Wells did not need a lot of words to explain Peter's torture there. He could have used a lot of words to explain what the hell the Winkler device and the spear are going to do together. But, the moment itself worked. The Doc Ock arm stuff has some energy, even if it was each just like a pair of gags that didn't go anywhere. And I laughed at the Wreck Rap Spider-Man kiss for just a second. I mean, the Wreck Rap Goblin kiss for a second. But I didn't really laugh at it because the gag itself was that funny. Personally, I find that gag a little too meta and cutesy because it suggests that Wreck Rap has seen the Sam Raimi movies somehow in limbo. That's actually the kind of thing that I'm expecting we're going to get a lot of when Joe Kelly is writing the book, because, Joe Kelly can't resist a meta gag. How many times has Deadpool pointed out that, the villain's going to monologue? Like, that's as stale as, like, pointing it out is as stale as the villain monologuing at this point, guys. But I did like that Wreck Rap doing that dopey bit of comedy is what distracts him long enough for him to get taken out of the fight by another cutesy meta joke, which was the Goblin glider / hoverboard, coming in, like, stabbing at him at a speed that must have been, up to 2 miles an hour, considering it was just 30 feet away in a basement. But yeah, overall, Mark, this issue's big confrontation looks like an office team meeting that got a little out of hand. It does not look like an epic throwdown with the Green Goblin. We are a long, long way here from the vivid, memorable, exciting splashes of the previous issues, much less an exciting fight taking advantage of New York City landmarks. Couldn't Oscorp be in the Chrysler Building? Or just last week, I was in the Daily News Building on 42nd Street, where they have that big, cool globe in the lobby that was in the original Superman, the 1977 Superman movie. It's so cool. You're in New York. Why are we in a laboratory that looks like a warehouse?
I got an answer for you. So I think we should just get to our grades, and then we'll have one more special segment for people. I'm going to go first here because, I'm not going to be courteous here, and I'm going to set the bar and see if you think I'm being too mean or maybe you're right there with me, but I'm giving this a D+. This is far and away the weakest issue of the arc so far, and, as we keep alluding to, it's just people doing stuff. I expect far more for my money at this point than stuff. So stuff gets a D+.
That's very funny. I think we are playing to type here because I wrote down beforehand C-.
All right, there you go. So not that far off, but all right. So before we get into our usual outro stuff, there was some big spider news this week. What we, I think, Alan, last time when we podcasted together, it had been announced that Zeb Wells was going to be wrapping up his run as the main writer on Amazing Spider-Man number 60. Of course, on Twitter or X or whatever you're calling that app these days, that hell site, Dapper Dan started putting out into the world that, based on one of the backup stories we got in, I forget which issue it was. I think it was the Jumbo issue we got a couple of months ago. That maybe it's going to be Joe Kelly taking over. And as Dan, ever the tea leave reader is, we found out what we're getting is a quote unquote epic story called 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, which is going to be written by Joe Kelly, and he's going to be joined by a writer I am unfamiliar with, but Alan apparently knows, named Justina Ireland. Do you want to mention who Justina Ireland is, Alan?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I work at Publishers Weekly, and so I keep up on genres that comic book people might not keep up on, like YA. She's a YA writer who's written a lot of books, and also really important to me, she has been an editor at this amazing science fiction magazine that I have read several times. It's very, very good every time I've done it. Well, I'm sorry, I should say speculative fiction magazine, Faya, which is about black characters coming from the African diaspora, from black writers. And it's really, really fascinating, surprising, exciting stuff that draws on a host of fantasy and science fiction traditions. She's been an editor there for a long time. They've done 40 or so issues so far. I think 30 or so issues right now. And the 4 I've read, I've really, really enjoyed. And I've actually tried to read more, but for some reason, I can't buy new ones. I can't buy new PDFs because their website won't accept my password. And I try to reset the password and it never sends me the email that it's supposed to. And I've actually emailed them 3 different times asking them for help resetting the password. So please, if anybody is associated with Faya Magazine hears this, please, please, please fix your password system. When I click the link, it never comes. Thank you. That is not what the Spider-Man podcast is about. But she also wrote this amazing young adult novel about the Civil War with zombies called Dread Nation that I honestly recommend. And I know some of you Amazing Spider Talk people are like, young adult? I don't read young adult. I'm an adult. I read comic books. Comic books are young adult, people. Accept it. Just because it doesn't feel like Hunger Games, just because... Hey, Spider-Man had 2 love interests, just like Katniss. Young adult. When John Romita came aboard, this book absolutely became young adult. Anyway, she also wrote some Star Wars books for Disney about the High Republic, which I believe is the setting of that Acolyte series that is better than angry people online say. And her books in that series have gotten good reviews. She's an interesting writer. I read the first issue of her Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt series. And, you know, like a lot of those event tie-ins, it feels like this issue exists partially to prove that this writer can do it. And she can do it. Like she does a fine job. It's nothing great, but it's a competent Spider-Man comic that has more Peter voice than you might be used to over in Amazing Spider-Man these days. And Mark, I'll continue moving on. The artists confirmed for this 10-issue series or 10-issue run are Ed McGuinness and Gleb Melnikoff, who's coming over from DC. And it looks like JR is leaving the book, possibly to go over to Daredevil. And readers who are looking, you know, for like a tease of where this all is going, there's a prelude tease in this Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu. Is that how you say it? Khonshu?
Or is it Nashu?
Nashu?
I don't know. I don't know Moon Knight.
Moon Knight's had a lot of good runs. I really like the violent.
I'm not dismissing Moon Knight. I'm just saying it's a big blind spot for me.
I would argue outside of the X books, which I don't read and never really have, Moon Knight ties with Daredevil as the most consistently interesting Marvel superhero book over the last 20 years or so, even though it's the sheer brutality of it often upsets me. Especially the run from Charlie Huston, the great pulp vampire novelist, who, boy, that was good stuff. Anyway, the Moon Knight story, there's a little bit in the Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu #0, and also there was that confusing Joe Kelly story in Amazing Spider-Man #50, a backup story that stated directly that Spider-Man will die in this coming story. This story titled The 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. I believe that's like 900 fewer deaths than Spider-Man endured during the Spencer run. So the Moon Knight story is going to feature the gods Khonshu and another god talking about Doctor Strange and his fate, and Spider-Man and Spider-Boy is going to be involved, swinging around town during something called a blood moon and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. This is advertised as a 10-issue Amazing Spider-Man epic, though the Moon Knight issue also suggests in a teaser, the bit of teaser text, that a new era of Amazing Spider-Man from Joe Kelly is coming. So maybe Joe Kelly stays on the book after this 10-issue run. It's unclear if this 8 Deaths of Spider-Man is a beyond situation with like just a story to, or if it's something that's going to be setting up an actual Joe Kelly run, taking it on afterwards, or something else happening. So there will be plenty for Dan to speculate when he comes back. Dan can work a bone, like, you know, the meat on a bone, like a dog, when it comes to any speculation. And boy, he will treat you to that next time, Mark.
I cannot wait. I'm waiting with bated breath. Now, meanwhile, you know, we've talked about we've mentioned Joe Kelly's name a bunch of times. You know, you gave some background on Justina Ireland. In terms of Joe Kelly, who's Joe Kelly? Well, a lot of people know who Joe Kelly is. Joe Kelly, of course, actually has written on Amazing Spider-Man in the past. He was part of the writer's room of the Brand New Day era, and I would call out the Rage of the Rhino story, which was one of Dan and mine 15 essential stories of Spider-Man, going all the way back to, I think, the Superior Spider Talk era. So go into our podcast feed and check that out. Rage of the Rhino is fantastic. Some of Joe Kelly's other Brand New Day stories are fine. However, he has also written about. Well, actually, do you have any thoughts on Brand New Day era Joe Kelly, Alan?
Well, yeah, I reread some of those issues recently, and I found that I feel about them almost exactly what I felt about them when they originally ran in, like, 2011, 2012, back when this was a baby podcast. And, you know, Joe Kelly writes a strong comic with a strong plot, strong inventive action. Like, he's very good at his job, and he's written so many issues of Deadpool, and kind of invented, you know, the current iteration of that character. You know, like the Deadpool movies take so much from Joe Kelly, but I personally don't really like that Deadpool feeling infecting my Amazing Spider-Man that much. Mm-hmm. And I find Joe Kelly's issues, the Brand New Day issues, they really lean into two tendencies of that run, of that era, that I don't like, even though I actually quite like that era a lot. And that is the brutality of them. You know, Spider-Man's always getting his jaw dislocated. You know, we're very specific about the incredible pain and broken bones that he's enduring every other issue. And then also there is the Joe Kelly bro-ish humor, which is a real hallmark, I think, of that era. Like in Amazing Spider-Man number 575, you might remember that's the one that opens with Spider-Man. He is rescued and a woman who is experiencing homelessness. And he has a lot of remarks about how bad she smells. And if you roll with it, it's pretty funny. But he's like complaining about how he never gets to do anything glamorous or fun as a superhero. And he actually says, why isn't ever like a panty emergency backstage during Fashion Week? Like that's the kind of thing that Joe Kelly really finds funny. And I'm really hoping that Justina Ireland can kind of tamp down that bro-ishness. You know, if you read his recent Spider-Man Deadpool series, you know, I made it through the first issue and then was done because there was just way too much about Deadpool being turned on, being tied up with Spider-Man. And it just kind of goes on and on relentlessly, like Joe Kelly dreams of being in the writer's room of a show like Two Nice Girls or Two Broke Girls or something. Like it's just a little much for me.
For sure. I will add to that. I agree with everything you said. With that, I will say I did go when I went back and reread, or actually for me it was probably the first time I read it on Marvel Unlimited years ago. His run on Deadpool. As Alan alluded to, I mean, like Joe Kelly kind of created the modern iteration of Deadpool, which for Deadpool works. You know, like I mean, you know, like if you like all that kind of humor and meta commentary and all that, it works great in Deadpool because Joe Kelly made it work in Deadpool. There is one issue specifically, and this was my, you know, kind of post Brand New Day going back and being like, oh, okay, now I kind of understand where the Spider-Man connection came from. It's Deadpool number 11. I think it's like 98 or something like that. And basically, this issue, it's one of my favorite Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man crossover stories ever, which is, it's got Deadpool like quantum leaping back into 1965 or whatever, into John Romita era Peter, basically experiencing, I think it was like Amazing Spider-Man like 60 to 62 or something like that. And it's got lots of great one-liners about MJ dancing and looking like a lunatic, and who was the old woman that used to hang out with Deadpool, Blind Al or whatever it is, like she's making one-liners. I mean, like, it's bonkers. And if you consider like the time and place of it, you're like, wow, this is really something interesting and unique and inspiring, and like makes me like love comics. The problem is, as Alan alluded to, we've never evolved past that when it comes to Joe Kelly. I mean, we've had Spider-Man Deadpool from the 2010s, not so great. It toyed around with, I got further than you did, Alan, but it did toy around with trying to address One More Day, but it really didn't. I mean, you think Nick Spencer was let down. I mean, Joe Kelly didn't, actually go near it at all. And then we had Nonstop and Savage Spider-Man, which, with Chris Bacalo, and like these are legitimately the most baffling miniseries I've ever read. I don't know if you even checked them out or not, Alan, but it is a not recommend for me. Like I just found those stories utterly befuddling.
I tried both of them. I just absolutely don't need Savage Spider-Man, but that's not for me. It's just not my flavor. Yeah. But Nonstop, I thought, looked pretty interesting, but I was reading it on Unlimited, and almost everything in it is a 2-page spread with, very jagged panels, and it just doesn't work in a digital format. But it did have a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, which Joe Kelly always has. And Mark, I got to agree with you that Deadpool issue you're mentioning, it is a knockout. And even as I'm complaining about the bro-ish morning zoo vibe that I often get from a Joe Kelly comic, the thing is, the dude is funny. I mean, yes. 3 jokes in a row will not land with me, but then a 4th will. And that is a much, much better batting average than most people who are offering 4 jokes a page, can manage to hit. Yeah. And in Deadpool, it really works.
For sure. Just a couple other Joe Kelly stats here. Most currently, Joe is the showrunner for Man of Action, which is Marvel's recent Spider-Man animated. I guess it's animated show. I don't watch it, Alan. I'm sorry. And apparently that is not like the most beloved show, even though Kevin Shinnick and Dan Slott, friends of the pod, write for it. And then I got to talk about the 2-parter with Black Cat that Joe Kelly filled in for Zeb Wells for as the prelude to Dead Languages, and AKA the I Love MJ Like a Sister comic, which, like, Alan, we could talk about the internet and Spider-Man fandom and all that kind of stuff, but like the I Love MJ Like a Sister comic might be the most reviled single issue of Amazing Spider-Man since they broke the marriage up in One More Day. I mean, am I being hyperbolic in saying that?
No, I think you're right, and justifiably. One thing that I really wish the current Spider office would step away from is, I'm going to use a phrase of yours, Mark, from earlier in this podcast history, not from this episode, because unlike Forbidden Planet, I listen. Marvel editorial loves to poke the bear, and they did that a lot at the start of the Wells run. They love to anger up the people who are very mad about the marriage, and it really blew up in their face this time. Like, it has poisoned this run, not just for the people who are predisposed to hate it, but everyone I know who occasionally reads Spider-Man, but doesn't always. They have the idea in their heads that the Zeb Wells run is an unmitigated disaster and one of the worst in the history of the book. And I don't think that would be the case if editorial was not poking the bear so aggressively.
No, I can't push back on any of that, Alan.
But can I say one more thing though about those 2 issues in particular?
Yeah.
Just like the Doctor Strange backup story in Amazing Spider-Man number 50 recently, I found those issues quite hard to follow. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but it is something that happens sometimes in Joe Kelly comics. Like sometimes they are harder to follow on the page than others. Zeb Wells makes it very clear, what's happening. Like that's what he uses his dialogue balloons to do, to make sure you know what's going on and then put a little style on it. With Joe Kelly, it often seems like his impulse is to put the funniest, most surprising thing in every balloon, so that you don't always know. Like you're trying to work out the joke when you should be telling us the story.
I'm just gonna kind of put a bow on this, but I'm not making predictions. I'm not projecting quality based on everything that we have run down. But I do think it's worth commenting. As we talked about earlier, this is another choice from the Brand New Day era. Of course, Zeb Wells was from Brand New Day. Dan Slott was from Brand New Day. The only one of the recent run of writers who was really not a Brand New Day person, of course, was Nick Spencer. And Nick Spencer seems to have kind of poison darted his way out of Marvel, mind wiped or whatever you want to say. And given what Alan so beautifully kind of captured earlier, which is kind of the PR, if you will, of the Zeb Wells run, like picking Joe Kelly, another Brand New Day writer and someone that Zeb has kind of shown comfort in handing the reins of the book over to, even as a fill-in, last year. To me, it's certainly an uninspiring choice. And I think it is the phrase I have written down here, and I'm going to stand by it because I think it best summarizes it, is it is controversially uncontroversial. It is a controversially uncontroversial choice. And by that I mean, like, the people who are already just bent out of shape with this book and hate it and want to hate on it and go on Twitter and say bad things about it, they're going to keep hating it. And this is a terrible, this will be a terrible choice in their eyes. At the same time, it is uncontroversial because I think this choice reflects a company that is happy with the direction of its book, is happy just kind of going from bit to bit here and not necessarily having a long-term vision or angle. And we've already seen Joe take the reins from Zeb on a couple of issues here, so we're going to do it for 8-10 issues here and see how it goes. And I don't know if he's going to go along with it or not. It doesn't matter, because this is an uncontroversial choice for Marvel, because they can trust Joe to do what they ask him to do. No one's going to rock the boat. No one's going to go on any podcast and say Kevin Feige told them to kill a character. Joe's going to do what he's going to do. And I part of me is just kind of like really resigned by that. Not happy, but like this is Marvel Comics. This is Amazing Spider-Man comics. I think it goes to what you were saying earlier, Alan. I think this goes higher than Amazing Spider-Man. I think this is how Marvel is being run right now. And going with someone who last wrote this book 10, 15 years ago is about the biggest embodiment of that one could possibly ask for. And that's what we're going to do now, whether we like it or not. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts on this?
I always try to be cautiously optimistic when it comes to these things. Although, obviously I'm feeling pretty low about the book these days, as I've suggested several times in this conversation, that, if this doesn't get better, I might just be done with it after 1000. But I got to say this. They've shown that they can't give us a coherent ongoing run with developing like themes and mysteries and subplots and a robust supporting cast. Maybe Nora Winters will come back. Joe Kelly writes her really well. They can't give us a lead character who has some purpose and agency and goals, like in almost every other book that Marvel or DC publishes. Since they can't give us all of that, maybe giving us a 10-issue long-form story not interrupted by a bunch of events, and maybe with Kelly's like horn dog humor tempered a bit by bringing in Ireland, maybe that's the best choice for this book right now. That honestly sounds better to me than Beyond. Beyond was messy and sometimes random, But I will give Beyond this. Beyond had something that the current run doesn't have. And that is that Peter had an agenda and there were clear stakes. Peter had to build back better, baby, during Beyond. You know, the issues where he was doing that were pretty exciting. Yeah. But of course, to get there, they had to put him in a coma. They had to sideline him into a coma, which honestly, it feels to me like that's where Marvel editorial would prefer that Peter Parker just stay. Amazing Spider-Man these days is Peter Parker's living coma. I like your phrase, controversial. Oh, wait, say it uncontroversial, whatever it was. Any choice to write this book will be controversial. Yes, that's just dead on. Like, obviously, after the Nick Spencer experience, somebody who tried to push the book in a different direction, the direction Marvel didn't want to go, they're not letting that happen again. So, but honestly, any choice will be controversial, so long as Marvel allows the writers for Amazing Spider-Man to take the blame for corporate decisions about the character. I'm somewhat sympathetic to Nick Lowe and the Spider Office because I truly believe they love the character and they're trying to tell exciting, compelling stories despite the parameters that they've been given, despite a bunch of bad edicts from on high. I've heard Nick Lowe say before that no matter how down people may feel about a character, people might think that they're done with the character, but all it takes is one good story to remind them of why they love that character. Mm-hmm. And I love that optimism. I think Nick Lowe seems like a truly like caring, kind of delightful person, but I don't think he's right about that because we've had several great stories in this Zeb Wells run and the world has not noticed. It hasn't turned the tide. The hate for this book from not just the loons online, but from like reasonable people online too. It's extraordinary. It's toxic. And I gotta say, I don't know that anybody can turn that around. But let me just say this. I'm pretty forgiving of the Spider Office in a lot of ways. But here's one way that I absolutely am not. I think it is frankly disgusting that they've let Zeb Wells take the blame for killing Kamala Khan and take the blame for breaking up Pete and MJ. Say what you want to say about One More Day, but at least Joe Quesada put his name on it, and he drew it, and he let Straczynski take his name off those last two issues. Quesada owned the choice to undo the marriage, but the current regime is comfortable letting a freelancer, Zeb Wells, get years of hate online over their choices, including death threats from the loons. So it's no wonder that they have to keep bringing back Brand New Day people. Writing this without protection, writing this without having an established big career already, it would be a career killer. God, that's bleak. I'm so sorry, Mark.
Right.
I like the show because it's
all
upbeat.
good. I love how you start. I love how you started saying, "I'm going to be optimistic." We are stuck in a circle of hell here, folks. I'm not going to add to the fire anymore, but instead I'm going to bring us out. Alan, are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
All right. It is that time. Time for all good things to come to an end. Good things. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of the Amazing Spider Nihilus. The Amazing Spider Talk. Thanks for filling in for us again, Alan. You are a true delight, even when you're giving up after 1,000. No, I'm totally poking fun at you. But seriously, thank you once again. According to Dan, he expects to have all of his equipment by the time we get to issue 54, but who knows, Alan? Maybe 3 times will be a charm. And if you taught me anything today, it's that by the third episode, you're going to be funny.
This podcast exists because of listener support on Patreon for only $3.99 a month, significantly less than Spider-Man comics. You can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews, the same week the comic releases, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses. Thank you to everyone who already supports us in the work that we do.
Dan and I really want to increase all the awesome work we do in the second half of 2024. So if you're already a patron or want to become one, please help us to meet our goals and make this this a better podcast by considering supporting our show. Just go to amazingspidertalk.com and click on that big old Patreon button to get yourself started. Well, we did it, Alan, but I have one more question for you. Alan, until your head blows off after you revealed your special precious gem that's going to reveal all of the plans of what the Joe Kelly run is going to look like, what's our motto?
Off he goes to do something. No. With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.